Welcome to Growing a B2B SaaS. On this show, you'll get actionable and usable advice. You'll hear about all aspects of growing a business to a business software company. Customer success, sales, funding, bootstrapping, exits, scaling, everything you need to know about growing a startup, and you'll get it from someone who's going through the same journey. Now your host, Joran Hoffman.
Welcome back to the Grow Your B2B SaaS podcast. The most listened episode of season 1 is still about how to go to market with Andrew Davis. And we're going to dive deeper in season 2 on the topic how to build a go-to-market strategy for your SaaS. We're going to do this with Mark Stouse. Mark is the CEO of Proof Analytics, an AI-powered platform that enables you to plan, predict, prove, and pivot your GTM investments. Before this, he was in marketing for 30 years and a CMO for 10 years prior to starting Proof. Next to his CEO role at Proof, he's a partner at a family office, a chairman, and member at different organizations. I think he's the perfect guy to discuss this. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Nice. I'm going to start with a really Dutch blunt question. Why should people listen to you today?
First and foremost, I think that there's so much out there that's opinion that you need to be thinking critically about anything and everything that you hear about go-to-market, or for that matter, the rest of life. So just because I say it to you doesn't mean that you just need to accept it. So check it out. Check out what I say vis-a-vis certain immutable principles of business and marketing, go-to-market, life, physics, whatever's relevant. I try really hard to only say those things that I can prove. I think that's actually one of the things that makes me somewhat different than a lot of people. I have actually a very not that great opinion of thought leadership, because what it usually means is somebody says, I think I see something. I think I have an idea about how this works. And they go immediately from that to writing about it or speaking about it, and they don't ever test it. Among other things, I'm a marketing scientist. I don't know if I necessarily call myself a data scientist, but I can certainly play one on TV. And so I look at this very much through a math and science kind of lens. So I have also done it. If there is a reason at all for you to care about what I have to say, I have used analytics to lead large go-to-market operations for 20 years, particularly in long cycle, complicated B2B type companies. Honeywell would be one, HP is another one, BMC Software is another one. So I would say that the number of B2B CMOs who can say with high credibility that they have stitched it all together, that they've connected all the dots on what moves the sales needle and the business needle from the marketing side, and does so to the satisfaction of the C-suite and the board is unfortunately still a very short list. And so Proof is on a mission to make that a much longer list.
Nice. And you already discussed go-to-market, GTM. If we go to the real basics, how would you explain it in your words?
Go-to-market really is everything that ultimately makes a customer buy from you, provably, or renew the relationship, deepen the relationship. Classically speaking, people tend to think about go-to-market as marketing, sales, customer success, and product. I think that though it's very dependent on the situation and the company and their customers. I have seen services included in go-to-market. I have seen contracting included in go-to-market. I've definitely seen accounts receivable collections put in there as well. One of my customers, one of the reasons why we were brought in was they lost a $30 million a year customer because one guy in accounting was enforcing a really rigid definition of accounts receivable terms. And after a while, he just alienated the customer company so much that they said, you know what, if that's what your company is all about, then we're done. That's rare. It's not an everyday thing, but it does go to show you that there's so much that's involved in go-to-market. And ultimately, if you don't understand how all of these things work together or sometimes work against each other in the context of everything that's happening outside the company in the marketplace. It's all the headwinds and the tailwinds, the wave that everyone is seeking to surf. If you don't understand that, if you can't calibrate that, you don't have a cohesive go-to-market program. You just don't.
And you guys use AI. I think that's when you go to the site, that's first thing you say, AI powered platform. What kind of role does AI play in a go-to-market strategy?
In our particular case, we use AI primarily to make the modeling process faster and easier for whoever's doing the modeling. There's also a lot of automation. Some people will say that automation is increasingly a subset of AI. I would say the way that I'm more comfortable wording that is that every part of AI has automation, it is enabled by automation. Otherwise, it's manual, and thus it's not AI.
Yeah. So in the end, like it will make things easier and probably saves a lot of time by automating.
Yeah, no, because at the end of the day, the math to do marketing mix modeling or go-to-market mix modeling, as it's increasingly known today, is known math. This is not anything new at all, and that's not where the magic is. The magic is in operationalizing the analytics, any analytics, so that it's relevant to the decision-making that's happening. That means it's happening at the clock speed of the business. So if business decisions are made daily, then the analytics need to be updating faster than daily. And that is entirely dependent on the reality of your business. Honeywell Aerospace, it's monthly recalculation of the model, because anything faster than that is just not worth talking about.
You already mentioned marketing mix modeling. Could you explain to the audience like what it is?
Sure. Or go-to-market mix modeling. Depends on whether you want to stay with the older term or the new one. Still the same thing. It is multivariable regression analytics. So multivariable regression is the number one analytical tool. The algorithm, the approach. It's used to answer 85% of the world's questions. It has a really super heavy role to play in things like climate change study or modeling epidemics and pandemics. It is the cornerstone, mathematically speaking, of the scientific method of inquiry. One part of an algorithm that's in proof was actually originally authored by Aristotle. So that kind of gives you a sense of how long it's been around. Marketing mix modeling has been around in the kind of the modern era for about 40 years. Procter & Gamble originally made it a thing, I guess would be the way you'd have to put it. They called it econometrics at the time. It's still called econometrics in Europe and Great Britain. It is all about saying, okay, that we live in a multivariable world. There's lots of factors that come together. They conspire together to create a particular outcome. And there's a lot of time lag and different time lags in those relationships. And so in order to understand the impact that you're having, you have to be able to use regression to say, okay, I want to look at how everything I'm doing and then all of these things that I know about that I don't control out there in the marketplace. I want to look at how all of that is coming together to create faster deal velocity. So the model, a regression model, is fairly straightforward, and you arm it with the data that's relevant to the question that you're proposing, and it starts to compute it. And ultimately, it will give you the following components. It will give you a historical stack rank of the most powerful piece of that all the way to the least powerful in terms of influencing this outcome. It will then give you a forecasted view into the future about what that's likely to look like at different times, given increasing or decreasing headwinds, tailwinds in the marketplace, different environmental factors that come into play. At the end of the day, it operates actually a lot like a GPS on your phone. It's saying, this is where you are, this is your goal, this is where you want to go. It's going to give you that forecast, and then in proof, it's going to recalculate those forecasts automatically on a particular cadence. And so it will reveal to you very quickly if you are on track or whether you are diverging, your actuals are diverging from the projected performance. And if they are diverging, it will allow you, they're on the same screen, to explore new mixes of your marketing and sales to get back on track and speed up or do whatever you need to do.
Yeah, and I think that's a really nice conclusion, as in is not just showing you where you are and if you're hitting the numbers, but also showing are you on the track to actually hit the goals like longer term. So actually showing you what the future is going to bring.
The forecast is the critical component. This is why data by itself isn't enough. It's crucial. It's to make gasoline, you have to have crude oil, okay? But you cannot put the crude oil in your car and run the car. That's not happening. The same thing is true when you're talking about understanding go-to-market. If all you have is data, because data is only about the past, and past is not prologue. If you can't go beyond that and put all the data into an analytical model to show you a forecast that then you can update regularly, really where you are, if you don't have that, you don't have anything.
Makes a lot of sense. You have a lot of companies come to you who already are doing GTM. You already have a lot of companies, of course, as clients who are also having their own strategy. As we say here in the Netherlands, like you looked into a lot of kitchens, I guess. You know exactly how companies are doing things. Like what are the most common mistakes companies make while building their go-to-market strategy?
They think of it as a marketing or a sales strategy or something like that, when the reality is there's only one strategy, and that's a business strategy. And that business strategy is executed. It's operationalized through the various functions. That's key. That's really key. As a marketer, you don't get to have your own marketing strategy. You are operationalizing the business strategy through marketing tools. And so same thing goes for sales or IT, or it's any of the functions this is true for. So I think that number one, you have to say, what are the business objectives that we have? What are we really trying to accomplish? And you have to work back into the functions and into the operational layer, and then further back into the tactics. And everything has to be unified against that outcome. That strategy is all about winning the war. It's not about the individual battles. So I'm giving it to you in a simplified, high-level view.
It was actually going to be one of my questions. If you can build a go-to-market strategy from scratch, like what would be your process? So you're already saying, look at the business objective and work your way backwards. But if you indeed dive a bit deeper, that would be your process strategy. Which departments would you involve? Any frameworks you would use?
Yeah. So number one, I think that you have to look at it 100% outside in. So that means talking to your customers. What parts of your business do they value? What parts of your business do they touch? What parts of your business touch them, either for good or bad? So you have to really build your go-to-market structure through their eyes, because the only way that you're going to deliver a go-to-market structure that gives you the business outcome that you're looking for, the success that you're looking for, is that first it has to be successful with the customers. So let's just say that at the end of those customer conversations, you have 6 areas of the business that everyone says they really care a lot about. Let's just say it's the 6 that I enumerated earlier. So you've got marketing, sales, customer success, product, and then you've got contracting, and then you've got collections, payments. Then you're going to have to say, okay, based on what they're saying, what's a weighting system? In other words, how much weight do we put on each one of these? What are the ones that are the most important over time versus the least important over time? What you're going to find there is that the answer depends on where the customer is. If they've already done the deal with you, then they're going to care a lot more about things like customer success, the reality of the product, and collections. Then they're not going to care about marketing at that point. Not that much. They don't ever stop caring totally, but this is a journey that they're on, and what they care about the most changes during the course of that journey. So I would say that's number one. Number two, you've got to have a mechanism, got to have the analytics so that you really understand how this is all working together or not. Another analog here is that you've got to have an air traffic controller, not just the people, but the system, so that you can see where all the planes are at any given time and avoid the collisions and ensure safe takeoff and landing and all that kind of stuff. Orchestration is not about making sure that everything in a campaign launches on the same day. That's really super basic illustration of orchestration. Real orchestration is, hey, this is how it's all being seen by the marketplace and by our customers. And we have to make sure that it all comes together in exactly the way for everybody at any given moment. Yeah. That's real orchestration. And that is not something that happens only within a function. This is happening across functions. And I think that's super important.
Yeah, and it ties back in what you said at the beginning, have those customer conversations so you can map everything out, what they're looking for. And would those be interviews? Would you actually interview them with a set of questions, or would that be like conversations where you would talk with them, or would you interview them?
I think that there's a lot of different tools. The survey still helps in some ways. Having really extended, like 1 to 2 hour conversations where you take a lot of notes is really effective. Sitting in a focus group is also really effective. But what is ultimately effective is being able to take all of or most of those perspectives and put it all together into a cohesive portrait of your ICP. The ICP to me is having that correctly defined is almost like the most important thing, because there's only about 4 or 5, maybe 6% of your total addressable market, the TAM, that's actually in the market for your product at any given time. So people are moving in and out of your ICP all the time. So you need to be really focused in terms of what are the big characteristics of the people that want to hear from us, that we should be talking to. And so I think that is absolutely a huge part of what we're talking about here.
Growing a B2B SaaS is tough. We know. This is why we started Reditus. We help you to grow your monthly recurring revenue without high upfront costs. How? By leveraging someone else's network and only giving away a commission when they deliver you a paid client. It's called affiliate marketing. It's already a really cost-effective and scalable revenue channel. We even made it better for you. With Reditus, you can start for free and only start paying us when you generate revenue. Learn more at www.getreditus.com.
Any other things successful companies have in common when you look at go-to-market strategies? Like, are there any channels, data, KPIs they track, anything?
So all of that are all derivatives of much more core questions. What channels you use is largely based on where your customers are and what are you trying to achieve. That'd be one example of that. I think that we tend to build marketing or go-to-market programs bottoms up. We start inside our company as we talk to all the business leaders of the different divisions. We find out what they need and want, and we build it that way. And then we hope like hell that our audiences resonate with it. And I think that is absolutely inverted, 100%. And everyone is tempted to do it. I've done it that way, meaning the inside out approach. And you learn serious lessons when you do that kind of stuff, because you may luck out. You may be just in this perfect situation where the marketplace responds very favorably to what you're serving up, but most of the time it won't. You're talking about what you want to talk about, not what they want to hear.
When we talk about challenges, like go to market, and especially when we stay like high level, it sounds easy, but it comes with a lot of challenges, and often common challenges. Can you name a couple of common challenges you will have when taking your company or product go to the market?
I think that some of the biggest challenges are the ones that honestly you can't really do anything about. Market timing is a huge one. When I look back on Proof, we were probably about 3 years early to the market. So the first 3 years, we used them pretty wisely, I think. We had about 20 customers that were essentially our very first customer base. They weren't paying us very much money at all, but they were paying us a lot in terms of market feedback and product feedback. But there wasn't an ICP that had really coalesced at that particular moment. There was just a TAM. And so we were marketing to the total addressable market, but who cares about that? And so it was difficult. It was discouraging. But a big, huge part of it, we had no control over. Market timing and product market fit those are two issues where you don't really have a way of knowing it ahead of time. It only becomes real when you've actually stepped into the pool of water, right? And at that point, it's okay, you're all wet now, and now you're going to find out what's really going on. And so I think that you have to be prepared for things to take a lot longer and be far more complex than what you thought. I think one of the challenges that a lot of founders have is that you wouldn't be a founder if you didn't feel like that you had a unique view of something that really mattered. At the same time, you have to be willing to listen to what the marketplace tells you about your ideas, about your product, and pivot, change. A lot of founders either aren't willing to do a lot of pivoting until they have essentially no choice, or they just take too long. I personally think that this whole issue of timing and fit, problem to market fit and product to market fit, is the reason why a lot of companies run out of money. They burn out. There were times when I was really worried about that with Proof. I'm just being radically transparent here. I think that if founders aren't transparent, at the end of the day, it's all kind of bullshit. And so I'm not talking about things that I have never experienced. I have lived all of this.
It's an interesting topic though, because you mentioned you were too early. SaaS founders stick maybe sometimes too long. They don't pivot quick enough. So I guess it's always an interesting topic. Like, how do you realize you're too early and you just have to stick with it for a bit, or you have to pivot because things are taking too long and people are not, or the marketplace is wanting something else, basically.
Yeah. And it also works the other way too, by the way. You will feel like nothing is happening, that no one cares, that whatever you've built, it just isn't connecting. Doesn't have a future. And then all of a sudden, sometimes it feels like in a very short period of time, half the world turns around and wants to talk to you. And that is a great example of time lag, because you've been marketing to the marketplace for what feels like an eternity, with nothing or very little coming back the other way. And then all of a sudden, things will happen in the lives of all these people and all these companies that you're marketing to that makes them go, what was that company? What was that company? Their boss, their CEO, whatever, has said, look, if you don't start proving marketing's impact on sales, I'm going to cut your budget in half and I'm going to fire you. That motivation did not exist a month before. Now it does. Now they're seriously motivated in a way that they weren't before. And you can't control that part of it.
Makes sense. We'll come down to the final 4 questions. When we're going to talk about go-to-market, like what kind of advice would you have for somebody who's just starting out and growing to 10K monthly recurring revenue?
So we're talking about an enterprise B2B SaaS product or service, particularly product, because that's not a lot of money, but you got to start somewhere. I would go to companies or people in companies that you have a relationship with and say, hey, we really think we have something here. We'd like you to sign up. We will give you a hugely attractive kind of offer. What we're really looking for more than money is feedback on the product. Help us make it better and better. And in our case, we were very blessed. We had really top tier brand side customers and agency side customers, consultancy side customers that took us up on that offer. And we're absolutely at that level of ARR that you're talking about, or MRR in year 1. But it's not a lot of money. If you're not actively raising money in some way, it's going to be very difficult to build a business on 120,000 ARR. It's just going to be very tough.
Nice. But you need, and that's what you mentioned, build a product with people but you have to have people use your product. So get first people in, make sure they use your product, have them give you feedback, and then from there you can start growing and attract.
Yeah. So look, it's predicated on, you've got to have, even in the early days, you've got to have a really good product. They have to be able to see that using even your early stage, your V1, V2 product is going to help them. It's going to be worth their time. Forget the money. The real cost is their time. So it's got to be worthwhile for them on that one. If then it really pans out and delivers a lot of value to those teams, then you're home free, because they're not going to want to give it up. And at some point, you're going to say, look, you know what? You helped us so much. We need to start charging you more for this, but we are so thankful. And so we're going to give you a special early bird only kind of deal. You're going to get essentially 1/3 price for the next 10 years or something ridiculous like that. And that way they don't feel taken for granted. They feel rewarded. They're very likely to say nice things and talk publicly about it and privately about your product. That's what you want. At the end of the day, you're building awareness, confidence, and trust in the marketplace. That's brand. Psychographically speaking, that's brand. So that's what's greasing the skids for your growth.
Exactly. And then that's a really good foundation to have, and also builds a bridge to the next question. So when you're past 10K monthly recurring revenue, what kind of advice would you give SaaS founders here when they grow towards 10 million ARR?
At that point, it is totally a confidence and trust game. If you want proof of this, just look at your average sales cycle. What happens? About halfway through, they stop asking you all kinds of investigative questions and they move entirely into risk mitigation and due diligence. They're also not really talking to you nearly as much as they are third parties that might have point of view on you. Because what they're really trying to assess is all that stuff that the vendor told us. Is that true? Can we count on that? And the more the answer is yes, so the more confidence they have, the more trust they have in you. The way that manifests analytically speaking, company after company shows this. You get bigger deals, so you get a lot of deal expansion going on when they have more and more confidence in particular. And trust is the governing factor on how quickly they close deals with you. So your average deal velocity, the relationship between average deal velocity and trust scores is off the charts. So if you have low trust, they're going to take a lot longer to do the deal.
Yeah, and this is where the advice of the 10K MR comes in. Make sure that you treat your customers so they start talking about you, and also that way you can build trust with future prospects.
And unfortunately, what you see today in SaaS, all SaaS, is a lot of distrust. This is my personal view. I don't think that most SaaS companies decide to deceive their customers. I do think that what happens is that they are startups for the most part. They are aspirational. They have dreams about their product. They talk aspirationally about their product so much that they forget that a lot of what they're saying is not yet real. Yet they are talking about it with such conviction that the customer believes it is real. And then when all of a sudden, Forrester, by the way, has a ton of data on this exact dynamic, then the customer buys the product, they start to operationalize the product, and they're like, hey, where's this feature and where's that function? And oh, that's all still, on the roadmap. That's a shock because the way you were talking about it was so convincing that they thought it was already part of what they bought. And when that happens, that really hurts the relationship. And so this is why you get a lot of churn, lots of churn. Churn is the number one thing that kills SaaS startups right now, regardless of what part of the market they're serving. Churn is the thing that just absolutely kills them.
Yeah, and selling to the clients, as you mentioned, with the ICP and giving their expectations is definitely going to save a lot of churn.
Look, this is the way I would look at it. Ultimately, you can either enforce your ICP upfront, which means walking away from certain deals, or you can have a really bad experience later.
Exactly.
The difference is that the really bad experience later, the churn, not only hammers your profitability, but it creates a reputational problem that becomes visible to the marketplace if it happens enough, and it makes it harder for you to close your next deal.
It's going to take you a lot more time as well. Selling to the wrong people is just going to open up support tickets, and it's just going to create a lot of frustration internally and externally. Final two questions. We are coming to the end. Like any kind of advice or encouragement that you want to give to other SaaS entrepreneurs out there?
Don't be afraid to be wrong, and don't focus on your dreams of exit or your shareholders' dreams of exit. You need to be focusing constantly on two things: your customers and your team members. Those are the two groups that are going to ultimately make you successful or not, make your exit valuable or not, make your shareholders happy with you or not. Too many CEOs, too many founders care way too much about shareholders. This is one reason actually why we don't have any VC investment in Proof. We did not want to open ourselves up to fun and games that go with that. And particularly now in this marketplace where all of us are, I am so thankful that is the case. Because the last thing you want is a VC trying to tell you how to run your business or forcing you to sell your business or whatever.
We interviewed Nathan Latka in our previous episode. He does non-dilutive funding for bootstrappers, so I would definitely recommend listening to that episode as well. Final question. What is one thing you wish you knew 10 years ago?
Every year after the holiday, I will sit there for about 3 days and I will really meditate on the past year and the year to come. And I will identify and write down things that I desperately needed to know a year ago and didn't know, but learned during that year. It is a very humbling experience. It's a very useful experience, but it's very humbling because no matter how smart you are, no matter how experienced you are, there is always something, and usually more than one thing, that is on that list. When you think about everything that you should have known before you founded your startup that you didn't know, it should scare you to death. That said, you won't ever get there. So you have to be comfortable with the fact that this is a journey. It's the oldest saying in the book. Everyone uses that phrase. It's just overused to death. But there's a reason for that. It's because that's exactly what it is at the end of the day. It is a journey. So you have to be willing to take things as they come, realize that you're going to, particularly as a founder, particularly as a CEO of a company, you're not ever going to step off the learning wheel. You can't afford it. And you're never going to arrive. And so just be okay with that. Be okay with the instability that it brings. Be okay with the fact that you will guaranteed not only make mistakes, you will make big mistakes. The thing to be grateful for is when you make those big mistakes and they're not fatal, be thankful for that. Because for a lot of people, those big mistakes are fatal. So I would just say there's not one thing you can say, so one of the things I've learned, for example, is the value of great legal is immense. Whatever you have to pay within reason for first class contracts, you pay it because it's like an insurance policy. You will need it sooner or later. I'll give you one very specific. So I'm the kind of leader who always, I can see the value of every person and the potential of every person. It's just a gift, for lack of a better way of putting it, that I have. So what I had to start learning even before I was CEO, this is back earlier in my career, is I was making mistakes with team members in terms of giving them way too much time to get themselves straightened out. And it was costing the rest of my team a lot. My delays in essentially letting someone go were placing a huge burden on the rest of the team. It's not fair. And when I finally really saw that clearly is when I started to really change. But even then, it took me a while to really recalibrate that. Like, how much time is enough time? Today, it's a lot shorter than it was even 5 years ago in my mind, because we can't afford people who can't step into a role and do it well almost immediately. We can't afford that. And we're paying people top dollar, so they need to be able to do that.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, it's not fair to anybody. And I think to your first story, I think Patrick Campbell summarized it really well in the podcast. Cuddle with the chaos. There's going to be a lot of things happening. There's going to be a lot of things on fire, and you just have to go through it.
Let me say this. It's one of the oldest sayings in the business of startups. There's only two kinds of startups. One that's in trouble and the other one is dead. Think about it for a second. We think about in trouble as having a very specific definition, but I know $100 million companies that are in trouble. So revenue from a certain perspective, and I get it. I'm not being cavalier, but there's that old saying that revenue solves all problems. No, it doesn't. It solves the problems that go with not having enough revenue. But as soon as you do have enough revenue, then you get a whole new set of problems. So you have to always think about it that way. So every startup is either in trouble or dead. Those are your only two choices.
Yeah, because there are always going to be problems. That's for sure. Thank you, Mark, for coming on. If people want to get in contact with you, what would be the best way to do so?
LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I don't really sell on LinkedIn. I'm there to help. I learned a long time ago that I either have to be on LinkedIn to help people or to sell. I can't do both. Because if people are expecting me to sell to them, then they've got their guard up and they can't hear me help them. So I made that choice a long time ago. Feel free to send me a LinkedIn message or a comment below one of my comments or something like that and say, hey, I'd love to talk to you. I'm happy to talk to you. The whole conversation will be about you and where you are, not about proof. Unless you want to do about proof, in which case I'm happy to talk to you about proof.
Exactly. Like any CEO, of course. Not selling, but if people want to buy, then we'll definitely
absolutely.
Give them.
Yeah.
Nice. We're going to link to your LinkedIn profile for people listening. You say Mark Stouse. If we say it here in Europe, it's Mark Stouse, but that's the wrong pronunciation. But we'll link it in the show notes. Thanks again. Thanks again for coming on, Mark. It was a pleasure.
Hey, thank you so much.
You've been listening to Growing a B2B SaaS. Joran has been a head of customer success before founding his own startup. He's experiencing the same journey you are. We hope you've gotten some actionable advice from the show. And we hope you had fun along the way. We know we did. Make sure to like, rate, and review the podcast in the meantime. To find out more and to hook up with us on our social media sites, go to www.getredditus.com. See you next time on Growing a B2B SaaS.